Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Grace Podcast. It is so great to have you with us. If you have been journeying through our series, How to Heal, you do not want to miss today's session because I've got Jaci Mun-Gavin with me, and Jaci and her husband Richard lead and pastor Anthem Church in Durban, KZN. And it is so great to have you with us today, Jax.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Kerry.
Jaci is a mom of 7.
Yeah, that's right. You counted right.
You would never say so. She's a tiny little ballet dancer body, and she's got the brain of an engineer as well. She's incredibly smart. She's incredibly beautiful. She's incredibly mothering with her children as well as those in her church. So we are really looking forward to having a chat with you today, Jax.
Thanks. Thank you, Kerry. Lovely to be here and lovely to be with everyone. Thank you for tuning in and listening. Looking forward to it.
Definitely. So, Jax, as you and I have been chatting about, and as I mentioned now as I started the podcast, that we're in this series, How to Heal. We've been talking about connecting with others. We've been talking about boundaries with others and how all these things contribute towards our healing. But something that's also important for me and close to my heart is the fact that healing is also something that's from God. Healing is something that we can pray and ask for, that He can give sometimes. And it's something that also is, I know, close to your heart and to your family, with a journey that you've been on. So what I would love our listeners and our viewers to be able to journey along with you in the story of your daughter, Kiara. So you can go ahead and share that with us.
Sure. So it was 3 years ago now, believe it or not.
Wow.
So it was a while ago now. So it was a Christmas Eve. I'm going to tell the story with little emotion. Please don't think that it has little emotion, but just so that we can get going to the parts that maybe will be of most benefit to those listening. But 3 years ago, on the way to the Christmas Eve service, I was driving and Kiara was in my passenger seat, and she's our 13-year-old daughter. And we had an accident. A motorbike went into my passenger door. And when I thought that we were okay, the car shook. The guy seemed to land all right on the other side, but other than that, I thought we were okay. I turned to Kiara to say, "Wow, that was hectic," and with that, she fell onto my lap, and I realized that she was actually bleeding from her head, and that she was unresponsive. So got a huge shock. Someone passed a towel through the window and said, "You've got to curb the bleeding." And as I did so, as I was told and tried to put pressure on her head, I realized that there was bone missing. That where the motorbike had hit her, it was soft where there should have been hard skull. So terrifying experience. And also on the same hand, you just don't quite believe it. I didn't think it was as serious as it was at the time. I jumped out the car and said, "It's fine. I can still preach. Richard can go with her to the hospital. It'll be fine." Obviously, there were other people there who weren't in shock and knew that I was talking nonsense and sent me off to the hospital with her. And again, at the time, we saw the chaos in the ER. You're trying to watch. You're thinking, surely it's going to be fine. I mean, we've got 5 boys. There's accidents and banging around. It's going to be fine. It's got to be fine. We just never prepared for news like we received that night, that she had fractured her skull and some bone had gone into her brain, and they had to rush her into surgery. That first evening, it was obviously very serious, but the next morning it actually took a turn even worse when the doctor realized that what he first thought was a localized injury, actually in the impact, the whole brain had been severely injured. They raped your injuries, and it had the whole brain had the most severe injury, and the injury was showing as the hours went on, and her brain was swelling. And so they had to actually rush her in on Christmas morning at about 8 o'clock. She'd just come out of surgery at midnight, rush her in a few hours later, same doctor. And he had to cut out nearly half of her skull to remove it, to allow for the brain to expand, to allow for fresh blood to come in. Unfortunately, that operation was also didn't prove to be effective. It made no difference. Her brain pressure didn't reduce. And so the next day, on that Christmas day, through the day, she was still not getting enough oxygen in her brain, as well as the brain continuing to swell, as well as the injury that had already happened. And by Boxing Day, there'd been a bit of heart stopping in the night and resuscitation during that night. And Boxing Day, the doctor phoned us and he just said, "I'm sorry. My job up until now has been to preserve brainstem life. Her brain is severely damaged. It's unrecoverable. She's missing most of her frontal cortex. I want to use honest words, not most of her frontal cortex is damaged, the left frontal cortex. And it's not, I can no longer preserve her even her breathing life. Even she was on machines at that stage, but he asked us to come in and say goodbye and bring the children and the grandparents. And yeah, at that stage, it was looking like the best case scenario was for us to let Kiara go. And she didn't die on that day, on Boxing Day, which was almost bad news because we didn't know what that would mean, because he told us that the brain was irrecoverable. So the fact that her brain stem continued was a bit scary. And then the days started to tick by with no change. Her just lying there on the machines. She was in the deepest level of coma. They had initially induced a coma. She was at a level of coma when she went in from the accident. They took her slightly lower to do the surgery and to keep her in that calm state. And then as her body started failing and her brain swelling continued, she ended up going down into the lowest level of coma, where there is no connection between the brain and the body. Not even reflexes are happening anymore. Excuse my non-medical language. But yeah, at this stage, we're now sitting on the side of the bed in the hospital, wondering what is going to happen. Is this how she's going to be for a few years? Is it going to end in a few days? And we remembered just in October, so this is now December, in October, we'd actually taken our two eldest girls on a trip with us, on a missionary trip or a ministry trip, to go to a conference, to go minister in another church. And on this trip, in this conference in Qatar, where it was actually a beautiful miracle conference, where it's illegal to have a Christian conference like that, and it was in a public venue, and for some reason the hotel turned a blind eye. So this beautiful moment with people around the world in this Middle Eastern country, and a couple that have both prophetic gifting, where they hear from God prophetically, they hear what God is saying a little bit more clearly than some others of us. They started to pray for us, but for Kiara specifically, and mentioned a few things. They didn't know she was a ballerina, so they said to her, "I don't know if you've ever heard of those hard shoes that ballerinas wear," which she just smiled knowingly, because she knows full well. And they said, we see the toes of a ballerina, that there is suffering. There's going to be incredible suffering in your life. Great prophetic word.
Yeah, thanks. I'll receive that.
So there's going to be incredible suffering in your life, Kiara, but to the rest of the world, it's going to look incredible. It's going to look beautiful. You're going to be pushed into the limelight. Try not to be afraid. Accept it when God pushes you into the limelight. But you're going to have many, many shoes. It was a very strange prophetic word. We're like, okay, good. She's going to suffer and have lots of shoes, but she'll be famous, and it'll look beautiful from the outside. And then the husband came in and said, "There's something more, Kiara. I feel like your intelligence is going to be switched on in the new year." And then he backed, and he said, "I know you're really smart, but I just have to, be true to what God is saying to me. I feel like your intelligence is going to be really accelerated, switched on in the new year." So we're sitting now, it's 27th of December, 28th of December, 29th of December, and we started to, I think of that word, and I think to myself, if she's never going to walk again, why is she going to need many, many shoes? And actually, that is a ballerina's tool. If she's never going to dance again, she's not going to need many, many shoes. We all just have a regular amount of shoes. A dancer has a ridiculous amount of shoes because they're made of satin, and you dance in them until they are threadbare. So we started to realize, hang on a second, God is speaking here. There is suffering. It doesn't yet look beautiful to the outside world, but even as she sleeps, she's been pushed into the limelight. We were starting to drive up to the hospital and drive past newspaper headlines on the signposts saying that this child has been injured, which is just bizarre because we're in a hospital, there's injuries everywhere. I mean, we're in the ICU, there's injuries being wheeled in many a day in one hospital. Why Kiara is already in the limelight when there is no miracle, there's no reason. And so other than maybe the sentimentality of being Christmas, but again, it's Christmas for everyone else is getting wheeled in as well.
Yes.
And so we start to pray very intentionally. And when I say we, I take zero credit for it. The communities, the churches around us, Kiara's friends, people who have been trained as well in prayer, who've trained themselves by going to prayer meetings, going to all-night prayer meetings, vigils of prayer, just start gathering around us. They are walking, they're praying. Churches, Grace being one of them, churches around are just praying for no reason. Again, God is doing a work.
And Jax, I remember that time because I remember even in the wards there in the hospital, there was it was beautiful watching so many, because it's not very often we're seeing younger generations praying that fervently, or as myself, anyway, I can speak from myself, but I don't see that very often. And yet around this time, like you say with Kiara, it was her friends and word just got out and everyone just wanted to be a part of praying for her and praying for her journey and for you as a family. It was an incredible thing to experience.
Yeah. And credit must go to some proper prayer warriors who had trained themselves and their children, Monique Naaman, Tanya Olafia, Tracy Lee Vessels, among others, who had really trained themselves in prayer and trained our children. Kiara had been in those meetings where they'd been trained. So remarkable to see them on the battlefield in action. There were doctors who came to us in the waiting room and said, please, can you tell these children to go home? It's not fair. I've had a look at her charts. There is no hope. This is not, you can't do this to these kids. They must go home. Sure. And when the parents lost hope, the children, I remember one of the girls turning to her mom, her father is a pastor, and saying to her mom, why has dad collapsed on the floor? Does he not believe the things that he's taught us?
Wow.
They just
challenge much.
Took the praying seriously. And so we started to pray for this miracle that had actually already been prophesied. I beg your pardon, there was a sixth part to that prophecy. As Anthem, we are going to see incredible healing. So again, I didn't realize that they were related to Kiara at that time. So we pray and they pray and everybody prays. And on New Year's Day, she's still around. There started to be some flutters the day before. I thought I felt her squeezing my hand. Richard told me, don't be ridiculous. It can't, we both managing it in our own personalities, My personality is optimistic. It's got to be okay. Richard's like, can we all just be measured? We can't lose her again and again. So you have to be so careful when you're in the middle of it, how you manage your hope. Our hope is in God, but it's not necessarily in a specific outcome, because that can damage us a little bit too much, Anyway, 1st of January, powerful. We go through into the ICU. As we arrive, the nurses and doctors are already there. They're starting to change a few settings on the machines. And Kiara opens her eyes. But at this point, we have no idea whether there's any recognition. That part that's damaged and is now no longer there, actually, about half of her left frontal cortex is no longer there, is memory, reasoning, higher thinking, speech, all of that. And so we're looking at her and she looks at us and she looks at the nurses, and we don't see that she's looking any differently at all of us. Like, does she know us differently she knows all the other strangers in the room? And she looks up at Richard, and her left brain, obviously her right arm is still weak, but she lifts up her left hand and cups his face and strokes his beard the way she always did. and we realize she knows who we are. And through the day, they take the pipe out. She was unable to speak. Her speech center was damaged, and she starts to point. She starts to write with her left hand, and then she refuses. She turns over to the right hand, and she builds up her strength. And within a month, she was speaking and within 2 days, she was walking and started. The speech took the longest, but yeah, this incredible miracle of healing and this incredible switching on of her intelligence on the 1st of January in the new year, and this confirmation, this incredible sign and miracle for all of us who were already watching the newspapers. It was on East Coast Radio, News 24, before she woke up, if I'm remembering all the details correctly. I might have the news outlets wrong again, because it's a testimony. I want to be so careful to be truthful. It was amazing how God got the media's attention, got our community's attention, not necessarily the world, but our part of the world, and then did what he wanted to do to show us who he is. And
Jack, something that stayed with me that was incredible, I remember hearing at the time from you, her surgeon, who'd obviously been there from the beginning, and seeing the ups and downs, knowing, excuse me, what was going on with her brain activity. And you were surrounded by a small group of professionals who were like in the top of their fields. And I remember one of them, when Kiara was starting to show progress, and he just kept saying that she was exceeding, like he kind of didn't really have an answer as to how and why, I'm probably remembering it not too well. I don't know if you remember what I'm talking about.
Sure. I think obviously everybody who hears, who wasn't close, they're going to say, how verifiable is this miracle? And I get that, because I would do the same thing. We want to put our trust in something that is true. And there's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with being a little bit skeptical, I think. So Kiara has since, for insurance purposes, because there's the road accident fund, now they want to prove what happened and what she is now and what she could have been, etc., etc. So she has had, since then, in the last 2 years, she's got all her brain scans, current brain scans, and you can look at her brain now, as well as the injury, as well as remembering that for 72 hours, her brain pressure was such that she didn't receive sufficient oxygen. So she was without oxygen. She's missing part of her brain, the entire injury, etc., etc. She's been to and these are all people who are trying to prove otherwise, so an educational psychologist, a neuropsychologist, a neurosurgeon, other than her neurosurgeon as well, a occupational therapist, an industrial psychologist, a speech and language therapist. I think there were 7, where she's gone to each one for half a day or 3/4 of a day, so 4 to 6 hours of testing. And every one of them, when we pick her up, they just shake their head. They're just like, some of them had heard about it because they're in the field. So some of them were expecting the miracle before we walked in the door. Others of them were caught off guard. And it's a miracle. She is an absolute and utter miracle. There's no denying. There's no denying if you have all the facts. So her neurosurgeon, who is not a follower of Jesus, a year later, how's that? God's kindness. A year later, Kiara's granny, Richard's mum, my mother-in-law, was knocking at a front door to visit somebody. And at the same time, a neighbor was at that same front door carrying a bunch of cookies. And it was Christmas Eve. And so Richard's mum was visiting because it was a family member, a great aunt or something. And so she was coming to wish her happy Christmas. Anyway, they meet at the door. These 2 grannies, strangers to each other. Indian lady is carrying the cookies, and Kiara's granny is there. And before they go in, they get chatting, and the Indian lady says, I know that you are celebrating Christmas. I am not actually dropping off these sweetmeats for Christmas, we're not Christian, but my family is celebrating this Christmas because it is the annual anniversary of when my grandson, who is a neurosurgeon, was involved in a miracle when he operated on a little 13-year-old girl. And so these two grannies meet on the first anniversary, both celebrating. The neurosurgeon's grandmother and Kiara's grandmother meet by chance and happen to share the story on the anniversary.
That's
just
insane.
The little favors of God, where for Kiara's granny, obviously that's such such confirmation. For the neurosurgeon's granny to see, she can see the grandmother who's grateful for what her grandson performed, and he is a very humble man anyway, but he has never taken one dot of credit. He obviously did an amazing, we are so grateful to him, but he knows more than any of us that all he could do is very skillfully provide Kiara with more time and more space in her head. And I think it's just such a beautiful picture that if we can help others heal, often all we need is just to create some time around them and some space for them so that God can come in and do the miracle. And he knows that was his part, and we know that we would be lost without him. But he couldn't do the miracle. He could just create the time and the space by keeping her alive a little bit longer and giving her brain enough space to go through what it needed to go through. So very special.
I love that. And that's so true about giving that space. And I know that he did that a lot for you guys and for her physically as well. And I know he was there with you and Rich as a support along the way as well. And so that's an incredible story. And it's something that even now, there were so many things that they kept saying, okay, maybe, she's showing this much progress, but she's still not going to be able to do this. And she's showing that progress there, but she still can't do that. She'll never dance again. She'll never, be able to do difficult subjects in school and things like that. And she's just excelled with those even as well.
Yeah. She's now writing her Cambridge grade 11 exam. She's just turned 17. It's maths and biology and physics and chemistry and all those sorts of things. She's done outstandingly. Even that first year, I think she got honors for a ballet exam. She's a very good ballerina, much better than I ever was. So she's really, God has been incredibly kind. God has been incredibly kind, and it's hard to know what to say around it because it just was a miracle. And sometimes I do think I think God is good enough that in every space and geography and every place, every time in history, he provides a miracle like this for us to know who he is and that he's real, and the hope that we have that is coming. I think, as you know, many people will come to me after I've shared this testimony and just say, wow, happy for you, sort of. Happy for you, genuinely, but why not me? Like, why not my child? And particularly when someone has lost a child. So I think healing is it's huge when it's for us, but it's massive when it's for a child and someone that we're wanting to protect and wanting to be able to do something for.
Yes.
And it's all I can say is I understand the acute feeling of losing a child. I haven't had to live with that long-term pain because that wasn't our story, but certainly those moments, those days when we thought that was our story, I can understand how incredibly painful it is. And then I say, I honestly don't think it's just about this age. I think that God has given us, I don't call it often when I'm sharing a miracle of healing, but rather a sign and a wonder, because Kiara she is for all of us a sign and a wonder of who God is, pointing to what he has for all of us, how he is still good. And the Bible promises us that that we will have miraculous healings, miraculous bodies, that we will have new bodies in the new creation, and that is the hope of things to come. Jesus was the first fruit of that. Each of us who experience spiritual renewal become an early fruit of that. And things like Yara, incredible things like what happened with her, are there to continue to be signposts, so that we know in whom our hope lies. And I know it's so hard to receive that. For me, in those times, though, when you are in that incredible grief, you understand the concept of deep time, like eternity, everything being one a little bit more. And so I hope that people who are experiencing grief, that grief can take them into that state of awareness of eternity, and just how close eternity actually is when you have someone that you love that's on that side of it. Yeah.
Yes. And did you feel, you're saying about the closeness and things, did you feel during those times, obviously it was traumatic and there was so much going on that there was probably hard to concentrate on things, but did you feel the closeness of God, or did you kind of feel like this is what we're hoping for, but I don't actually feel the attachment to it, if that makes sense? Did it feel a bit detached, or did you actually feel the closeness of God?
So interestingly, Richard and my ability to completely pray and trust for Kiara's healing now was limited, because, as I alluded to a little bit earlier, when you think you've lost a child, it feels like you've fallen off a 10-story building. Like you feel like your bones have turned to jelly. And it is not a feeling that you're capable of feeling repeatedly in a short space of time, And so we had to leave her. We had to surrender her. We had to let go of our hope that we had for her the day before. All of that had to be left in pieces on the floor. We couldn't pick it up, because if it dropped again the next day and then the next day, and you just can't do that.
No.
Other people have to be able to carry that for you. So I wasn't in that space of this is all going to be fine, God is amazing, I just have faith. It wasn't like that. However, that my ability to be in God's presence and see the way He sees, I felt like the first miracle that I experienced was the miracle of my sight being healed, because I could see what God was talking about. My hope was completely planted in eternity, and it was okay. It was okay. I could see that there was going to be a day when it was all going to make sense, and that day, to try and hope it was today, was too painful, but to see it in the future, there was complete peace in that, and being able to look far. And so, I think God is there, but you can only put your hope concretely in Him and in eternity. And then whatever part of eternity leaks into today, because we continue to pray, we continue to trust in Him, we continue to trust in His character, beautiful. We get to walk in that. And it's so great. But our joy, our hope, it's secure, because it's not in the leaking of heaven, but in the security of when it is fully to come.
Sure, some powerful words there. And I like how you're saying, you got that peace, and it doesn't make sense. So it's like the scriptures say that you're going to have peace that passes human understanding. So it doesn't make sense that all this is going on and you're getting told these terrible things that are a possibility for your daughter, and all those kind of things, for you to be able to feel peace amongst that time in and of itself is a gift from God amongst what you were going through, so incredible that you were able to have that as well. And as you were saying, sometimes there's a lot of the time there are those of us, including myself, who pray for healing for ourselves, for others. Even in my own family, I've experienced it with quite a few family members, even where there's physical ailments and things like that, and we pray and we trust and we hope, and sometimes you think you need to get a pastor to pray for you so that their prayers are heard more than you. And, you try so many different avenues because you want to tap into that resource. You want to tap into that promise that God gives of healing and wholeness. As Jesus did that when he walked the earth, and he said, when I leave, you're going to be able to do these things and more. So I think so many of us will have that faith, and it feels like we have that faith and that hope. And yet our prayers feel like they fall short because we don't see that healing on this side of eternity. And I know that that's a bit of a difficult question, but I'm not sure if there's any kind of advice that you may have for people who are hearing this story and going, wow, that's incredible. And kind of what you alluded to, what about me? Why hasn't my prayer been answered? Or why isn't mine being answered? Like I say, I know it's difficult, but if there's any kind of advice or anything that you've learned along this journey that you could share with us, that would be great.
Sure. So I think I know that the Christian journey is a journey of surrender. And it's a journey of realizing that we're not in control and that we aren't going to be in control. And that's literally the Christian story. Adam and Eve weren't satisfied with not being in control. They wanted to be God. They wanted to be able to make those decisions. They wanted to be able to be the ones that said, this is right, this is wrong, God has to heal here, he has to do this. We want to be in control. You must remember that Richard and I have experienced this incredible miracle, and we have zero surety that Kiara is going to be alive tomorrow. In the same way that any of us are going to be alive tomorrow. Does that make sense? So yeah. Our surety is not in Kiara's health to this day. Our surety is not in our health. Our surety is, none of our children are safe, are perfectly protected. And so we continue to have to live lives of surrender, trusting in God, trusting in his goodness. The only place where we can feel safe, where we can know that our treasure is protected, is when we put it in God's hands. And that sucks. It's horrible. I want to be able to say, the neurosurgeon, he says, Kiara, so you're absolutely fine, but do you think maybe you could just wear a helmet for the rest of your life? I would feel better. And then I said to him, oh, is she not okay? He's like, no, I would like everybody to wear a helmet for the rest of their lives. Yeah. And we all have that feeling. We all have that emotion of, can we just protect what is ours? Can we just be in control? It'll just be so much better. Yeah. And we're not in control. And God is in control. And we will have peace when we surrender to that. And God is good. And he has promised us excellent promises. But he has also assured us that in this life we will have suffering like Jesus. And that suffering will be hard. And it'll also be part of what makes us and what forms us and what heals us and what prepares us to live a renewed life, to live as part of that new creation. And actually it's on us to surrender everything, the healthy and the unhealthy, the good and the bad, everything in this life we have to surrender to him if we're to have any peace at all, because that is where our peace lies.
Yes.
And I know it can be empty, it can feel like empty words, but it is the only words that have any fullness, actually. Because everything is only safe in the hands of God. And when we surrender it, because we're not good gods, we're not good creators, we're not good protectors, and God is.
Beautifully said. I think the wisdom that's come for you from this is possibly something that might not have come unless you'd gone through the situation. We often say that what we've gone through, God uses, and we've seen that in so many people's lives. But it's not only the fact that he's using the stories, it's the wisdom that he brings to those of us who go through it. And it's the strengthening of your faith and Richard's faith, your immediate family, your kids' faith, after seeing God answering these kind of prayers as well. It's something that changes you, and I'm sure changes you for forever. It's not something that's you're going to forget anytime soon. I want to say before we close that you've got you wrote a book about your journey in with Kiara called Keep Hope Alive. Beautiful book. You're a published author. You've got a couple of books with parenting as well. I do know that. But just in particular with this topic that we've been chatting about Keep Hope Alive, before we close, I'd just love to know how that slogan, because that was a very popular slogan at the time with the beautiful ballet dancer icon, how that came about, and then if anyone is looking to read your book, where they can find that as well.
Sure. So actually, on that first night, a doctor friend of ours, Dr. Johan Wessels, met us in the ER, and he gave us a psalm. And so it was Psalm 37. And when I came home, at midnight on Christmas Eve, Richard went back to the hospital when Kiara came out of surgery, and I was alone for the first time since the accident at midnight, 1 a.m. And just spent a moment with God, and he ministered that to me, that I had a promise that I was allowed to keep hope alive as I longed for God to come through for me. I think it's Psalm 37 verse 7 in the Passion Translation. It's quite an unusual translation, and it actually has changed. It's in the old edition, so you don't find those words in the Bible anymore, unfortunately. The sentiment, absolutely, but that specific translation of that verse, no. But yeah, so just it was a promise for me on that very first night when I just fell to the floor and just said, God, you have to give me something, like, your word, you've told me it's alive. I need living words now. And what can I hold on to? And so that's that scripture I felt he gave to me, but it was a bit of a challenge, because the psalm goes, fix your heart on the promises of God, and he will give you the desires of your heart. Keep hope alive. But in the middle, the verse between those, it says, make God the utmost desire of your life. Sure. And so I just felt like God said, I promise you that you may keep hope alive. But what I require of you is that you let go of everything and fix your heart and your both hands firmly on me and make me what you want. And so from that day, I had to let go of Kiara and hold on to God for dear life. And turns out that's not a bad thing to do.
Clearly.
Yeah.
I love it. And it's such a beautiful reminder, and it's something that, like you say, I love that there was something tangible for you to hold on to as well, because that's what we need. You know, we pray and we can ask, but we need something tangible as well. We humans, we're here on earth, we need something, you know. So I love that was what was given to you. And yeah, so if people are looking to find your book, if people are looking to find out more about you, or even around your parenting series, how can they get in touch? How can they get a hold of
I've just got it all on one website, JaciMun-Gavin.com. So if you go onto there, it's a funny spelling, JACI, Jaci Mun-Gavin, no hyphen or anything, and .com. And there's a store there and a blog and a bit more info, and yeah.
That's awesome. It's, you know, I'm not trying to do a punt in any way. If people are like, oh, you're trying to make money, it's literally just sometimes, again, the tangible.
I'll give you a cut.
Yeah, they give me the cut on the side, you know. It's, you know, it's great to have something tangible that's there with us. It's a good reminder. It's something that, you know, when there's books like that of testimonies to look back on again and read from time to time to encourage and lift our spirits. So yeah,
and I've written it as a journey. For slow reading, with the idea that actually you go on that journey of time. There's time when we're playing it in real life. You don't get the end 5 minutes after you hear the beginning.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah,
exactly that. I mean, we know the ending before we've read the book. You know, when you were living it, you, like you say, you did not know what was coming the next day.
Exactly.
Oh, Jax, it's been so great to have you. I'm so grateful that you were happy to come on and just share a bit of your testimony. I know it's quite hard to condense things into a smaller amount of time as well. So grateful for that. Thank you for the encouragement. I really pray that it's reached some hearts today, that it's given comfort, that it's given inspiration and encouragement to those who are listening and watching as well. So thank you so much for joining us, Jax.
Sure, it's such a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Thank you if you've managed to listen right to the end. And yeah, lovely to be with you. Always lovely to be with you, Kerry.
Awesome, Shane. Thanks, Jax. And thanks everyone else. We look forward to seeing you next week on our Grace podcast. Bye.